Policing is a tough job, no doubt about it, but sometimes things go way beyond the call of duty and turn into absolute nightmares. Over the years, there have been cases so brutal, so shocking, that they left entire nations speechless. They just left an unsettling mark on history. Today, we're diving into 5 of the worst deaths in the history of policing, stories that still haunt us to this day. It was May 26, 2022, a day that should have been just another routine training session at the Los Angeles Police Academy in Elysian Park. This was where officers honed their skills, where recruits learned the ropes, and where experienced cops like 32-year-old Houston Tipping pushed themselves to be better. Tipping was no rookie. He was a 5-year LAPD veteran, known for his dedication and hard work. He patrolled Devonshire and even served as a bike instructor, always striving to help his fellow officers. But that day, something went terribly wrong. During a grappling exercise, Tipping was paired with another officer. The move seemed simple enough. One officer locked the other in a bear hug before both went to the ground. But when they fell, something snapped. Tipping suffered a catastrophic spinal cord injury, and just like that, his life was slipping away. He was rushed to Los Angeles County USC Medical Center, but the damage was too severe. 3 days later, on May 29th, he was gone. LAPD Chief Michael Moore called it a tragic accident. At the funeral, he spoke of Tipping as a man who went the extra mile to make the world a better place. But behind the condolences and formal statements, something didn't sit right. Not with Tipping's mother, Shirley Huffman, not with the people who knew him, and certainly not with attorney Brad Gage, who believed this wasn't an accident at all, but something far more sinister. According to Gage, Tipping had been investigating a case involving 4 LAPD officers. A serious case. A case that, if exposed, could ruin careers. One of the officers named in the report. He was there that day. He was in the training session. The dots were too clear to ignore. And as more details surfaced, the tragedy of Houston Tipping's death twisted into something darker, something that smelled like a cover-up. The autopsy told a chilling story. Tipping's injuries weren't just from a fall. 3 broken ribs, a lacerated liver, subdural hematomas, and a spinal cord so damaged it sealed his fate. The LAPD claimed a mechanical CPR device had caused the rib fractures, but Gage wasn't buying it. Medical records showed no sign the device had even been used. Even worse, an MRI revealed staples in his head injuries that hadn't been accounted for. If this was just an accident, why did it look so much like a beating? Then came the biggest red flag of all. There was no video footage. The LAPD insisted the training session hadn't been recorded. Convenient. Too convenient. Training sessions were usually documented, yet somehow, this one wasn't. Without footage, there was no way to verify their story, no way to confirm what really happened in that room. And so, the questions mounted. If Tipping was getting close to exposing something, could his death have been a warning, a message? Was this training session a setup designed to intimidate or worse, eliminate a man who knew too much? The LAPD, of course, denied everything. They called it an accident. They promised an internal review. But for Huffman, for Gage, and for those who saw the cracks in the story, that wasn't enough. Houston Tipping was more than a patrol officer, more than a bike instructor, more than just another name on a report. His family and friends spoke of his kindness, his dedication to helping others. Even in death, he gave life, his organs donated to those in need, a final act of selflessness. But his own story, that remains unfinished. Was Officer Houston Tipping the victim of a tragic accident or something far worse? The truth is still out there, waiting to be uncovered. And until it is, one question lingers. What really happened inside that training room? It was a quiet Monday morning in November 2024. In East Charlotte, North Carolina, people were starting their day. A team of officers had gathered outside a house on Galway Drive, preparing to serve an arrest warrant on 39-year-old Terry Clark Hughes. Hughes was no ordinary suspect. He was a felon, wanted for illegal firearm possession and fleeing law enforcement. Twice. The officers knew there was risk. The U.S. Marshals Fugitive Task Force was on the scene, a team of highly trained officers from different agencies, including Samuel Pelos and William Elliott from the North Carolina Department of Corrections, Thomas Weeks, a deputy U.S. Marshal, and Joshua A., a respected officer with the Charlotte, Mecklenburg Police Department. They had done this before. They were trained for moments like this. As the officers approached the house, a deafening crack rang out, then another, then chaos. Hughes wasn't waiting to be arrested. He was armed, waiting, and he had a high-powered rifle. Bullets ripped through the morning air as he fired relentlessly from inside the house, over 100 rounds tearing through the scene in seconds. Pelos and Elliott were the first to fall. They hit the ground hard as their colleagues rushed to save them. But there was no time. Hughes kept firing, and before anyone could regain control, Weeks and Joshua A. were down too. A neighbor, Sing Chan, found himself trapped outside his home in the chaos. He held up his phone, recording, his voice trembling as he pleaded with officers to help him get inside. But there was no time for that, no safe way in. The officers told him to get away, to find cover anywhere he could. The gunfight raged for hours, bullets ripping through the walls of nearby homes, sirens wailing as backup arrived. And then, finally, it ended. Hughes was dead, but so were 4 officers. Joshua A. had served Charlotte for 6 years, dedicating himself to public safety with quiet strength. He was also a first-class sergeant in the North Carolina Army National Guard. His loss hit hardest at home. His wife, Ashley, and their 3-year-old son, Andrew, left behind to navigate a world without him. At his memorial service, held at First Baptist Church in uptown Charlotte, a horse-drawn carriage carried his body through the streets. Hundreds lined the sidewalks, waving flags, saluting, holding back tears. Inside the church, Ashley spoke through grief, sharing memories of the man she loved. Their son, too young to fully understand, waved at a picture of his father, a heartbreaking image that seared into the hearts of those who watched. Samuel Pelos had served 14 years with the North Carolina Department of Adult Correction, working in special operations and intelligence. He left behind a wife and 2 children who would now have to face life without him. William Elliott, another 14-year veteran, was known for his meticulous work and devotion to public safety. His wife and young child survived him, but their world would never be the same. Thomas Weeks had spent 13 years with the U.S. Marshals Service after previously working in Customs and Border Protection. He was a loving husband and a father of 4 children who would never again hear their father's voice. In total, 8 officers had been shot that day. Some survived, but survival didn't mean they were unscathed. CMPD officers Chris T., Michael Giglio, Jack Blowers, and Joshua Campbell made it out, but their wounds, both physical and emotional, would take time to heal. Statesville Police Corporal Casey Hoover, another officer injured in the ambush, was expected to recover, but the scars of this day would never truly fade. The city mourned. The law enforcement community grieved, but beneath the sorrow, questions lingered. How did this happen? Could it have been prevented? Were there warning signs that went unnoticed? One thing was certain. Officers Pelos, Elliott, Weeks, and Joshua A. made the ultimate sacrifice. They ran toward danger when the rest of the world would have run away. Their names would not be forgotten, their stories not erased. They left behind families, colleagues, and a city that would forever bear the weight of that morning in November. Their courage, their dedication, and their final moments would stand as a testament to what it means to serve, no matter the cost. It was a sunny day of September 2024 in Queensland, Australia. It was a day for the annual Wall-to-Wall Ride for Remembrance, a solemn yet powerful event where officers from across the country rode in honor of their fallen comrades. Among them was Senior Sergeant Brendan Wiblin, a man who had dedicated 28 years of his life to the Queensland Police Service. The journey had begun in Brisbane, hundreds of riders forming a long procession of flashing badges, all united in one purpose: to remember. Brendan was among them. The final destination was Canberra, where they would stand together on National Police Remembrance Day, paying tribute to those who had made the ultimate sacrifice. But Brendan would never make it to Canberra. At around 3:20 p.m., as the riders made their way near Glen Innes, New South Wales, something went wrong. Brendan moved to overtake another rider, but in a sudden, he lost control. His motorcycle veered off the road, the tires skidding helplessly against the asphalt before the bike plunged down an embankment. Fellow riders slammed on their brakes, rushing to his side. Bystanders ran forward. CPR was performed desperately as they willed him to hold on, but the injuries were too severe. By the time paramedics arrived, there was nothing more that could be done. Brendan was gone. The news spread like wildfire, sending a wave of grief through the Queensland Police Service and beyond. This was a ride meant to honor the fallen, but now, in the cruelest twist, it had claimed another life. Assistant Commissioner Brian Swan struggled to find the words, echoing the heartbreak felt by Brendan's colleagues and friends. He spoke of the loss, the shock, the way the entire police family now stood united in grief. Queensland Police Commissioner Steve Golchowski called it devastating. Brendan had died in an event meant to honor those lost before him. How could they make sense of that? For those who had worked with him on the Gold Coast, it was unfathomable. He wasn't just a colleague. He was the one who always had their backs, the one who brought sharp wit and unwavering dedication to every shift. The pain reached beyond the police force. The riders who had shared the road with him year after year were left reeling. Brendan had been there to remember his fallen friend, and now they would have to remember him. Shane Pryor, president of the Queensland Police Union, spoke of Brendan's loyalty, his integrity, the way he had always been the first to step up for others. He wasn't just riding to honor the fallen, he was one of them now. Despite the overwhelming grief, the ride continued. It had to. Brendan's family made sure of it. His son, Liam, who had ridden beside him in past years, was shattered but resolute. His father would have wanted them to keep going, to finish the journey in his name. As the riders reached Armidale, they paused, heads bowed, joined by New South Wales police officers in solemn tribute. But the journey wasn't over. They pressed on toward Canberra, carrying Brendan's spirit with them. Tributes poured in from every direction. Bianca Stone, a Gold Coast political candidate, shared her heartbreak, calling Brendan a great man. As the days passed, the grief didn't fade, but the support never wavered. The riders completed their journey. They arrived in Canberra, standing shoulder to shoulder on National Police Remembrance Day, knowing they had lost one of their own along the way. The summer heat hung heavy over Washington, D.C. that August day as Officer Wayne David, a 25-year veteran, set out on what would be his final shift. He had dedicated his life to keeping illegal guns off the streets, but in a cruel twist of fate, one would take his own. But this day would be different. It started early that morning, when officers spotted a man acting strangely near a parked car. Something about him didn't sit right. Moments later, he tossed a firearm into a storm drain and took off on a motorcycle, disappearing into the city's streets. Wayne was the best at what he did. Firearm retrieval was his specialty. When his team got word of the discarded gun, there was no hesitation. Wayne would handle it. Then, in a split second, everything changed. A gunshot. The impact was instant. Wayne collapsed. Blood pooled beneath him as his fellow officers rushed to his side. Sirens screamed through the streets as they raced to the hospital. But deep down, they all knew. By the time they arrived, there was nothing the doctors could do. Wayne David, beloved officer, father, fiancé, friend, was gone. The hunt for the man responsible began immediately. Authorities released the name Tyrell Lamont Bailey, 27 years old, dreadlocks, last seen in a white t-shirt and blue shorts. He had abandoned his shoes in his desperate escape, vanishing into the streets, trying to outrun the weight of what had just happened. A $60,000 reward was posted for any information leading to his arrest. The search for Bailey stretched on for a week. Then, suddenly, it was over. He walked into the 7th District Police Station and turned himself in. No dramatic chase, no last-minute escape. just a man who had run as far as he could, only to realize there was nowhere left to go. He was charged with carrying a pistol without a license, but the weight of Wayne's death hung heavy. Prosecutors reviewed every angle, deciding what came next. More details surfaced. Bailey had a history with guns, offenses dating back to 2017. That day, after tossing the weapon, he had fled so fast he had to abandon his shoes. He had flagged down a stranger on a motorcycle, claiming he had been robbed, convincing the man to take him to Maryland. The writer had no idea who he was helping until he saw the news later. At Wayne's funeral, the weight of his loss was unbearable. D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser and MPD Chief Pamela A. Smith stood among the sea of blue uniforms, paying tribute to a man. The investigation into his death continued. There were questions that haunted those left behind. Could it have been prevented? Had the system failed him? What if the gun had been handled differently? What if it had never been on the streets to begin with? Wayne David's death was more than a tragedy, because Wayne wasn't just another fallen officer. He was a protector, a father, a friend, and the city he loved would never forget him. The morning of April 3, 2019, was bitterly cold in Hampton, Maine. Detective Ben Campbell, a respected Maine State Police officer, went about his shift. At just 31 years old, he was known for his dedication and his compassion. He had a young family, a wife, Hillary, and their 6-month-old son, Everett. That morning, as he patrolled Interstate 95, he noticed a vehicle stranded on the side of the road. The driver was in trouble. He pulled over without hesitation, stepping out of his cruiser to help. It was a routine act of kindness, something he had done countless times before. Then, in an instant, everything changed. A logging truck rumbled past. No one saw it coming. No one had time to react. 2 massive wheels suddenly detached from the truck. One rolled harmlessly into the median. The other barreled straight toward Ben. Emergency responders rushed to the scene, fighting to save him, but the injuries were too severe. At Northern Light Eastern Maine Medical Center, the news no one wanted to hear was confirmed. Ben was gone. The shock spread like wildfire. His death was first called a tragic accident, but the truth was more painful. An investigation revealed the wheels had been improperly secured. Negligence had played a role, yet no criminal charges were filed. The inspector responsible was given only a 6-month suspension. At his funeral, thousands gathered. Law enforcement officers from across the U.S. and even Canada stood shoulder to shoulder. The Cross Insurance Arena in Portland, filled with grief, echoed with tributes to a man who had given everything. Colonel John Coate captured the heartbreak. Not stopping would have never entered Ben's mind. He had lived his life with a purpose: to serve, to protect, to help. That instinct, the very thing that made him extraordinary, had led him to that roadside. His wife, Hillary, stood before the crowd, her voice trembling but strong. She spoke of their love, their life together, and the promises they had made. She vowed to raise their son with the same kindness and courage his father had shown. For her, Ben had been a hero long before that day. The pain of his loss did not fade. 2 years later, Maine still honored him. Flags were lowered in his name. His sacrifice became a call to action, a reminder of the dangers officers face and the deadly consequences of negligence. The roads remained treacherous. Trucking accidents, often caused by carelessness and improper maintenance, continued to claim lives. How many could have been prevented? How many more families would have to suffer? Ben Campbell should have gone home that day. He should have held his son, kissed his wife, and laughed with his friends. But fate and failure stole that from him. His story is not just one of loss, but of a lesson, a reminder that responsibility, vigilance, and simple acts of care can mean the difference between life and death. He will never be forgotten, and in his name, the fight for safer roads, for better accountability, and for those who serve continues.